I'm Melissa Hamilton, 34, and I was reviewing quarterly projections when my phone lit up with my parents' faces. They never call during work hours. Sweetheart, Ryan needs help with a $700,000 loan. It's your duty to pay him back after everything he's done. I smiled politely at their earnest faces on my screen, my stomach dropping to my knees. Of course, I replied calmly, already calculating my revenge. They had no idea what was coming. Before I dive into this nightmare, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button. If you've ever had family members who think your success means their financial problems are now magically your responsibility, trust me, you'll want to see how I handled this situation. Growing up in the Hamilton household meant one thing was always crystal clear. Ryan was the golden child. 2 years older than me, my brother could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. When he knocked over Mom's favorite vase playing ball inside the house, boys will be boys. When I got paint on the carpet during an art project, I was grounded for a week. This pattern continued throughout our childhood in suburban Chicago. Ryan was the star quarterback with so much potential, while my academic achievements were simply expected, because I was naturally smart. My parents, Thomas and Linda Hamilton, were good people in many ways, but their blindness when it came to Ryan shaped our entire family dynamic. College was where the first major betrayal occurred. I had worked part-time jobs throughout high school, saving every penny, in addition to the college fund my grandparents had established for both of us. Ryan, meanwhile, had blown through his portion in his first year at State University, partying and failing classes. It's just a phase, my father insisted at Thanksgiving dinner my senior year of high school. He's finding himself. Finding himself apparently required 3 different colleges in 3 years. Each time Ryan would start with enthusiasm before the inevitable call would come. He needed more money. The program wasn't right. The professors didn't understand his learning style. I was preparing to attend Northwestern University on a partial scholarship, planning to use my college fund to cover the remaining tuition. 2 weeks before my first semester, my parents called a family meeting. Melissa, my mother began, her hands clasped tightly together. Ryan has an amazing business opportunity, a startup with his roommate that could really take off. I knew what was coming before they said it. We've decided to invest in his future, my father continued. We've taken most of your college fund to help him get started. The betrayal cut deep. What about my education? I asked, fighting back tears. You're so responsible, honey, my mother said, as if that was a consolation. You'll figure it out. You always do. And your brother will pay you back once the business takes off. That business, a sports memorabilia authentication service, folded within 6 months. Ryan's partner disappeared with most of the investment. My college fund was gone, and no one seemed particularly concerned except me. I worked full-time while carrying a full course load, often falling asleep over textbooks after midnight shifts at a local diner. While I was stretching myself thin, Ryan had moved back home where my parents supported him while he regrouped. When I graduated with honors, my parents attended the ceremony but spent most of the day talking about Ryan's new idea for a food truck business. My achievement was reduced to a footnote in the ongoing saga of Ryan's potential. I moved to New York after graduation, determined to build my own life, away from my family's dysfunctional dynamics. Starting as an entry-level marketing associate, I worked my way up through sheer determination. No family connections, no financial safety net, just hard work and strategic career moves. 10 years later, I had become senior marketing director at Atlas Media Group, one of the top firms in the country. I had finally achieved financial stability with a comfortable apartment in Brooklyn and even some investments beginning to grow. For the first time, I felt secure. Meanwhile, Ryan had cycled through half a dozen career paths, each funded by my parents. The food truck, a sports coaching business, a dropshipping website, a cryptocurrency investment scheme, all launched with enthusiasm and abandoned when they required actual sustained effort. Our family interactions had settled into a predictable pattern: holiday gatherings where my parents would downplay my accomplishments while amplifying Ryan's latest venture. I had learned to expect the pattern, though it never stopped hurting. What I never expected was that phone call in my office with my parents' solemn faces, informing me of my duty to bail my brother out of a $700,000 loan. It was the final straw the moment I realized this cycle would never end unless I ended it myself. After that shocking call, I couldn't focus on work. I closed my office door, telling my assistant Jack to hold all calls for the afternoon. Something about this situation didn't add up. $700,000 wasn't small change, it was more than my parents' house was worth. How exactly did Ryan end up with a loan this size, I asked myself. My brother had never demonstrated financial responsibility or business acumen worthy of such an investment. Someone had made a serious mistake and I needed to find out who. My first call was to Jessica Alvarez, my closest friend from business school, who now worked as a financial advisor at Meridian Partners. $700,000, Jessica whistled through her teeth when I explained the situation. For what kind of business? They said something about a real estate development company, I replied, realizing how little information my parents had actually provided. Apparently Ryan was going to revitalize some commercial properties. Jessica's silence spoke volumes. I need to see the paperwork, I told her. Can you help me understand what I'm looking at when I get it? Absolutely, Jessica replied. But Mel, be prepared. This sounds problematic. That weekend, I flew to Chicago under the pretense of discussing how I might help with Ryan's situation. My parents welcomed me with relief, clearly expecting me to open my checkbook immediately. We're so proud of you for stepping up, my mother said, hugging me tightly. Family first, that's how we raised you. I just need to understand the situation better, I replied carefully. Do you have any paperwork from the loan? My father hesitated. Ryan has all that. He's handling the business side. Where is he anyway? I asked, noticing my brother's absence. He had a meeting with potential investors, my father said proudly. Still working hard to solve this himself. At 11 p.m. I heard the front door open. Ryan stumbled in, reeking of alcohol and expensive cologne. He'd always been handsome in that conventional way that opened doors, tall, athletic build with our father's confident smile and our mother's blue eyes. Hey sis, he exclaimed too loudly. Come to bail me out, huh? Always the responsible one. I forced a smile. I need to see the loan documents first, Ryan. His expression flickered momentarily before regaining its easy charm. Course. Tomorrow. Too tired now. Big meetings, you know how it is. The next morning, Ryan was mysteriously called to an emergency meeting. Before leaving, he tossed a folder on the kitchen table. Everything you need to know, he said breezily. Just a temporary cash flow issue. The folder contained maybe 10 pages, far too little documentation for a loan of this size. What I did find were inconsistencies in reported income, vague descriptions of business activities, and references to companies I couldn't verify existed. I took photos of everything and sent them to Jessica. Her call came within the hour. Melissa, this isn't a legitimate business loan, she said gravely. These documents have been altered. See the different fonts in the income statement, and the bank listed here doesn't even offer commercial loans of this size without significant collateral. Armed with Jessica's insights, I visited the bank listed on the documents. After some persuasion and a call to their fraud department, I spoke with Thomas Winters, a loan officer. Ms. Hamilton, he said carefully, I can confirm that your brother did approach our bank, but the loan was denied. These papers have been modified. He hesitated. There's an ongoing investigation I cannot discuss further. My next stop was the address listed for Ryan's supposed real estate company. Instead of an office, I found a mail service store where Ryan rented a box. Piece by piece, I uncovered the truth. Ryan hadn't received a legitimate business loan at all. He had been gambling high-stakes poker and sports betting and had borrowed money from increasingly dangerous people. The loan was actually debt to individuals who wouldn't be sending polite payment reminders if he defaulted. When I presented my findings to my parents that evening, their reaction stunned me. You've always been jealous of your brother, my mother said dismissively. He explained, you might try to sabotage him. Ryan told us you'd say something like this, my father added. He said you can't stand that he's finally found success without your help. The gaslighting was so blatant it took my breath away. When Ryan returned that evening, I confronted him directly, showing him copies of the altered documents and the notes from my conversation with the bank. For a moment, genuine fear flickered across his face before he composed himself. Okay, I cut some corners with the paperwork, he admitted, but the opportunity is real. I just needed to make it look more official for the investors. What investors, Ryan? There is no real estate company. You never believed in me, he hissed, dropping the charming facade. You've always thought you're better than me. This isn't about me, I replied. This is about you lying to everyone and expecting me to pay for it. He stormed out, but not before I overheard him on the phone in the driveway. She knows. Yeah, I'll handle it. Get everyone on board. Later that night, my phone began buzzing with messages from relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, all expressing concern about my refusal to help family in need. Ryan had been busy spinning a narrative where I was the villain. By morning, it seemed the entire extended Hamilton family believed I was a cold-hearted success story who refused to help my struggling brother despite having more money than I could spend. 3 days after returning to New York, I received a text from my mother, family dinner Saturday. Important to have everyone together during difficult times. 5 p.m. Despite my instincts screaming this was a trap, I booked another flight to Chicago. If nothing else, I needed to make one more attempt to make my parents understand the gravity of Ryan's deception. When I pulled up to my parents' colonial-style home in Oak Park, I immediately noticed the excessive number of cars lining the street. This wasn't just a family dinner. My mother opened the door before I could knock, enveloping me in a hug that felt oddly performative. Everyone's in the living room, she said, steering me down the hallway. The ambush was even worse than I'd anticipated. Not just my parents and Ryan, but Uncle Frank and Aunt Patricia, cousins Tyler and Brittany, my father's sister Georgia, and her husband Walter, and even my elderly grandmother Ruth sitting in the corner looking confused about why she'd been brought there. Ryan sat in my father's armchair, the symbolic seat of authority in our household, looking somber but composed. My parents stood behind him, a united front. Melissa, Uncle Frank began taking charge immediately. We've gathered as a family because we're concerned about the division that's happening at a time when unity is crucial. I stood in the doorway, suddenly understanding how a fox feels when surrounded by hunting dogs. Division, I echoed. Your refusal to help your brother, Aunt Patricia clarified, her voice sharp with disapproval. After everything your parents have done for you. I nearly laughed at the absurdity. Everything they've done for me. Like using my college fund for Ryan's failed business. That's ancient history, my father interjected. This isn't about the past. Actually, it is, I replied, setting down my purse and pulling out the folder of documents I'd brought. It's about a pattern of behavior that's continuing right now. Ryan doesn't have a legitimate business loan. He's in debt to people who shouldn't be lent a library book, let alone hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's not true, Ryan said quietly, his voice steady and reasonable, the voice he always used when lying most boldly. Melissa is confused about how startups work. I co-signed for part of that loan, Uncle Frank revealed, his face reddening. Ryan showed me the business plan. It's solid. This was news. Which part did you co-sign, I asked. $200,000, he admitted. No wonder he was leading this intervention. He was financially implicated. Frank, I said carefully, I spoke with the bank. They denied Ryan's application. Whatever you signed, it wasn't with them. A flicker of uncertainty crossed my uncle's face, but Aunt Patricia jumped in. Stop trying to confuse everyone with details. This is about family responsibility. You have the means to help and you're refusing. Cousin Tyler, who had always followed Ryan like a shadow, chimed in. It's pretty cold, Melissa. You're living in luxury in New York while your own brother could lose everything. He can't lose what he never had, I replied, opening my folder. These are the documents Ryan gave me, and these are the real bank records I obtained from Thomas Winters at First National. They don't match. I laid them on the coffee table. No one moved to look at them. Ryan explained all that my mother said dismissively. There were administrative errors that he's sorting out. The important thing is he needs help now. He needs $700,000 because he's been gambling, I stated flatly. And possibly worse. Ryan's face darkened. That's a lie. She's always been jealous of me, of the opportunities I create. She can't stand that I might finally surpass her success with this business. What business, Ryan? I challenged. The address you listed is a mailbox rental. There are no properties, no employees, no permits filed with the city. Show me one piece of evidence that this company exists beyond paper. I don't have to prove anything to you, Ryan snarled, his mask slipping momentarily before he composed himself. Mom, Dad, I can't believe you're letting her talk to me this way after everything I've been through. Grandmother Ruth, who had been quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. Reminds me of your Uncle David, she said to my father. Always had a scheme, always needed money. Died owing everyone in town. A moment of uncomfortable silence followed before my father cleared his throat. This is different, Mom. Is it? I asked quietly. Enough, my mother declared. Melissa, the bottom line is that Ryan needs help and you're in a position to provide it. If you refuse, you're turning your back on this family. I looked around the room at these people who shared my blood but seemed to exist in an alternate reality, one where Ryan could do no wrong and I existed solely to clean up his messes. I'll tell you what I'm willing to do, I said finally. I'll pay for a forensic accountant to trace where the money actually went, and I'll cover the cost of a financial counselor to help Ryan create a repayment plan that doesn't involve extorting his sister. That's not good enough, Ryan snapped. It's all I'm offering. Then you're not the person we thought you were, my father said, the disappointment in his voice, still capable of cutting me to the quick despite everything. I picked up my purse and headed for the door. I'm exactly who you raised me to be: responsible, hardworking, and honest. Maybe it's time you applied those standards to everyone in this family. As I walked to my rental car, I could hear raised voices from inside the house. My phone began buzzing with messages before I even pulled away from the curb. The first was from my mother. If you walk away now, don't expect to be welcomed back. It was the moment I realized this wasn't just about money. This was about control, about maintaining a family system where Ryan was entitled to everything and I was expected to sacrifice whatever was necessary to maintain that illusion. Sitting in my car outside my childhood home, I made a decision. If they wanted war instead of truth, I would give them exactly that. Back in New York, I threw myself into work trying to process what had happened with my family. 3 weeks passed with no contact from my parents, though Ryan sent occasional late-night texts alternating between guilt trips and vague threats. I was reviewing a major campaign proposal when Jack knocked on my office door. There's someone from Westfield Partners online too, he said. They're pretty upset about something. Westfield was one of our newest and largest clients. I picked up immediately. Miss Hamilton, began Marcus Westfield, his normally cordial tone noticeably chilly. I received a rather concerning email regarding your company's handling of sensitive information. Normally, I wouldn't put stock in anonymous tips, but the details included were specific. My blood ran cold. What email, Mr. Westfield? He forwarded it to me while we spoke. The message claimed Atlas Media was using Westfield's marketing strategy as a template for one of their competitors. It included details that only someone with internal knowledge would know, but they were twisted, taken out of context to appear unethical. This is categorically false, I assured him, scanning the email. We maintain strict confidentiality firewalls between competing clients. I'll launch an investigation immediately. After an hour of damage control with Westfield, I began tracing the email. The sender's address was a generic Gmail account, but the writing style was familiar. Too familiar. A search through my personal emails confirmed it. Phrases and syntax patterns matched Ryan's writing exactly. Somehow, my brother had obtained proprietary information about one of my biggest clients. Before I could process this, my desk phone rang again. It was Alicia from Thornton Industries, another major client. "Melissa, I need to ask you something uncomfortable," she began. "Did you authorize someone from Atlas to approach our competitors with a better offer? Because we've had 3 calls today." By day's end, I discovered Ryan had contacted not just Westfield and Thornton but 4 other Atlas clients, either trying to damage my reputation or possibly attempting to poach them for some venture of his own. How had he obtained this information? I lived alone, kept my work laptop secured, and never discussed confidential client details outside the office. Then I remembered 3 months earlier Ryan had visited New York to network and had stayed at my apartment for 2 nights. He'd had ample opportunity to access my home office. I called our IT security team to check for any unusual access to my work accounts, and sure enough, there had been logins from Chicago using my credentials shortly after Ryan's visit. He must have installed keylogging software on my personal laptop. The next morning, I flew to Chicago again, this time with a very different agenda. I'd learned from a former classmate that Ryan had recently taken a position with Vertex Marketing, a small agency struggling to gain market share. Now his actions made sense. He was trying to sabotage me professionally while stealing clients for himself. I went directly to Vertex's offices, a converted warehouse in Chicago's West Loop. The receptionist recognized my name immediately. "Miss Hamilton, Mr. Hamilton mentioned you might stop by sometime. Should I tell him you're here?" "Please do," I replied, taking a seat in the waiting area. Through the glass doors I could see Ryan in an office with Vice President on the door, a title he hadn't earned and certainly wasn't qualified for. When he emerged, his face showed momentary panic before settling into his usual confident smile. "Melissa, what a surprise! Come to see the competition." He gestured grandly around the modest office. "Let's talk privately," I suggested, my voice level despite the anger coursing through me. Once in his office, which I noted was significantly larger than the cubicles where actual experienced employees worked, I closed the door and placed my phone on his desk, recording app activated. "I know what you did," I said simply. "Westfield, Thornton, Blackridge Media, Sterling Enterprises. You tried to damage my reputation and steal my clients." Ryan's smile didn't falter. "Business is business, sis. Not my fault if your clients see better opportunities elsewhere." "You accessed confidential information from my personal computer," I continued. "You used stolen credentials to log into Atlas systems. That's not business, Ryan. That's corporate espionage. It's illegal." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. "You can't prove anything." I played the recording of my conversation with our IT security team detailing the unauthorized access from Chicago. "IP addresses don't lie, Ryan. Neither do the emails you sent using information only available on our secure servers." His face darkened. "What do you want?" "I want you to stop. I want you to send retraction emails to every client you contacted. And I want you to tell me the truth about the $700,000, or what he challenged, though I could see sweat beading at his temples. Or, I take this evidence to the police, to Atlas's legal team, and to Vertex's CEO. I wonder how they'd feel about the liability you've created for them." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Ryan's boss, David Mitchell, entered without waiting for a response. "Everything okay in here?" he asked, eyes darting between us. The receptionist mentioned some tension. "Mr. Mitchell," I extended my hand. "I'm Melissa Hamilton, Senior Marketing Director at Atlas Media and Ryan's sister. I came to discuss some concerning communications your company has had with several of our clients." Mitchell frowned. "What communications?" I watched Ryan's face pale as I explained the situation in careful professional terms. Mitchell's expression grew increasingly grave. "Ryan, wait outside, please," Mitchell said finally. After Ryan left, Mitchell apologized profusely, assuring me Vertex had no knowledge of Ryan's actions and would conduct an immediate investigation. He was just hired last month, Mitchell explained. Impressive resume, excellent references. He trailed off suddenly, doubtful. I checked those references, I suggested. Thoroughly. As I left, Vertex Ryan was waiting by the elevator, fury etched on his face. You've ruined everything, he hissed. Again. You did that yourself, I replied as the elevator doors opened. Oh, and Ryan, those clients you approached, they've all signed exclusive 3-year contracts with Atlas now, even the ones who were on the fence before. His face contorted with rage as the elevator doors closed between us. That evening my parents called, more angry than I'd ever heard them. How could you get your brother suspended? My mother demanded without preamble. He was finally getting his life together. By committing corporate espionage against my company, I asked incredulously. That's getting his life together. He says you're exaggerating, my father cut in. That you're trying to sabotage him because you can't stand competition. I laughed bitterly. I've emailed you the evidence. The unauthorized access logs, the emails he sent to my clients, everything. Review it, then call me back if you still think I'm exaggerating. They didn't call back that night. Or the next day. When my father finally called 3 days later, his voice was subdued. Ryan says you provoked him, he offered weakly. That you've always flaunted your success, making him feel inadequate. In that moment, I realized the depth of my parents' blindness when it came to Ryan. No evidence, no matter how concrete, would ever be enough to break the spell he had cast over them. I've said everything I need to say, I replied, ending the call. That night, I received the first threatening text message from Ryan. You have no idea what you've started. A week after the confrontation at Vertex, I was working late when my doorman called up. Miss Hamilton, your brother is here, insisting on seeing you. He seems agitated. My heart raced. Don't send him up, Miguel. I'm not expecting him. He's being quite persistent, Miguel replied diplomatically. I'm calling the police if he doesn't leave, I said firmly. He is not authorized to enter my building. 10 minutes later, my apartment buzzer rang repeatedly. I checked the security camera feed on my phone. Ryan was somehow in the building, standing outside my door. Open up, Melissa, he shouted loud enough for neighbors to hear. We need to talk. I dialed 911, but before I could speak, I heard another voice in the hallway. Is there a problem here? It was Ethan Porter from 5B, a litigation attorney I knew casually from building meetings. Mind your own business, Ryan snapped. Family matter. If you're disturbing residents at 11 p.m., it becomes a building matter, Ethan replied calmly. Miss Hamilton, do you want this person here? No, I called through the door. He's not invited, Ethan. I've called the police. You might want to leave before they arrive, Ethan advised Ryan. Trespassing charges aren't great for employment prospects. This isn't over, Ryan hissed loud enough for me to hear through the door. You think you've won. You have no idea what I'm capable of. After the elevator doors closed, Ethan knocked gently. He's gone. Are you okay? I opened the door, shaking slightly. Thank you. That's my brother. He's not stable right now. Want me to wait until the police come, he offered. The police took my statement when they arrived but said they couldn't do much unless Ryan returned. The officer suggested I file for a restraining order given the threatening nature of Ryan's behavior. The next morning I did exactly that, providing the text messages, building security footage and statements from Miguel and Ethan. 3 days later my parents called in a panic. A restraining order against your own brother, my mother cried. How could you? He came to my apartment uninvited at 11 p.m., Mom. He threatened me. He just wanted to talk, to work things out. My father was nearly shouting. Do you know how this looks? What this will do to his career? His career was built on lies, I replied evenly. And I'm more concerned about my safety than his reputation. You have to drop this, my mother insisted. It's tearing the family apart. I'm not dropping it. Ryan needs consequences for once in his life. They hung up without saying goodbye. The restraining order was granted, requiring Ryan to stay at least 100 yards away from me, my home, and my workplace. I provided copies to my building security and Atlas's front desk. I thought that might be the end of it, but 2 weeks later Jack rushed into my office looking pale. "Someone broke in last night," he said. Security called. "They only accessed your office." The police investigation revealed that nothing appeared stolen, but my desk had been searched and my computer tampered with. Security footage showed a figure in a maintenance uniform with their face carefully angled away from cameras. I knew immediately it was Ryan. The building required ID badges, but Ryan had always been charming enough to talk his way past security. What was he looking for? The answer came the next day when my biggest client, Jonathan Reynolds of Reynolds Consumer Brands, called. "Melissa, I received a disturbing email from your account last night. It contained confidential information about one of your other clients, suggesting we could use it to our advantage." My blood ran cold. "I didn't send that, Jonathan. My office was broken into last night." "That's concerning," he replied. "The email certainly seemed like your writing style." Ryan hadn't just accessed my computer, he'd studied my communication patterns well enough to impersonate me convincingly. Thankfully, Atlas's IT team confirmed the emails were sent after the break-in, and security footage supported my alibi. Jonathan was understanding once presented with the evidence, but the damage to my reputation required careful repair. My boss, Jack Wilson, called me into his office after the incident. "This situation with your brother is becoming a liability, Melissa," he said frankly. "Two clients have expressed concerns about security." "I understand," I replied, stomach sinking. "I'm taking every precaution." "I know you are," Jack assured me. "And to be clear, the company stands behind you. We've hired additional security, and our legal team is prepared to pursue charges. But I need to understand, is there anything else I should know? Any other potential vulnerabilities?" I told him everything: the loan, the gambling debts, the family pressure. When I finished, Jack looked troubled. "This goes beyond sibling rivalry," he observed. "Your brother sounds desperate." "He is," I agreed. "And desperate people are dangerous." That danger became even more apparent when I discovered Ryan had been spreading rumors throughout my professional network about me having mental health issues, claiming I was unstable and vindictive due to childhood trauma. Several colleagues approached me, delicately expressing concern about my well-being based on things they'd heard. It was a subtle but effective campaign to undermine my credibility. The final straw came when I nearly lost the Westfield account after Ryan, somehow using a spoofed phone number that appeared to be mine, called Marcus Westfield's assistant with a series of bizarre demands and erratic comments. Only my long-standing reputation and quick damage control saved the relationship, but it was a close call. Ryan was systematically trying to destroy everything I'd built. That evening, checking my online banking, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. There had been multiple failed login attempts to my investment accounts using my credentials. Ryan was escalating from professional sabotage to financial attacks. I immediately called Jessica. "He's trying to access my money," I told her, explaining the situation. "Change all your passwords immediately," she advised. "And Melissa, be careful. This isn't normal sibling competition anymore. This is something else entirely." As I hung up, a text arrived from an unknown number. "You think a restraining order can stop me? I'm just getting started." The attempted breaches of my financial accounts were just the beginning. 3 days later, while reviewing my credit card statement, I noticed several large purchases I hadn't made: expensive electronics shipped to an address in Chicago I didn't recognize. I immediately froze all my accounts and contacted the fraud departments, but the damage was spreading. Somehow Ryan had obtained enough of my personal information to begin opening new credit lines in my name. Working with the credit card companies, I traced the fraudulent purchases to an electronics store in Chicago's South Loop. The store manager confirmed that someone matching Ryan's description had picked up the items, showing ID that appeared to be mine, a sophisticated fake. I spent hours on the phone with banks and credit agencies, placing fraud alerts and freezes on my credit report. The stress was taking a physical toll. I wasn't sleeping, barely eating and jumping at every notification on my phone. Jessica suggested I meet with her colleague at Meridian Partners who specialized in financial fraud. This is beyond routine identity theft, she explained. This feels targeted and systematic. The specialist Michael Torres reviewed my financial records and the pattern of attempts. This isn't amateur hour, he concluded grimly. The attempts are strategic, focusing on accounts that might not have immediate alerts. Whoever is doing this understands financial systems. It's my brother, I explained. He's always been resourceful when motivated. Well, he's motivated now, Michael replied. And he's using sophisticated methods, routing attempts through different IP addresses, timing attempts during system maintenance windows. Does he have a background in finance or technology? No, but he's always been able to charm information out of people. And he had access to my apartment, my laptop, possibly my mail. That would explain it. Michael nodded. He's probably working with someone who has technical expertise. This isn't a solo operation. The thought of Ryan collaborating with others to destroy me sent chills down my spine. Michael helped me establish new security protocols, including two-factor authentication on all accounts and a separate secure email address known only to financial institutions. We also set up monitoring to track any further attempts. Those safeguards proved crucial when 2 days later someone attempted a wire transfer of nearly all my savings, $342,000 to an offshore account. The attempt was blocked by the new security measures, triggering immediate alerts. The bank's fraud investigator Amanda Chen called me directly. This attempt originated from Chicago, but was routed through multiple VPNs, she explained. Very sophisticated. If you hadn't established the enhanced security, it likely would have succeeded. Amanda advised me to file a police report, which led me to Detective Keith Harris of the Financial Crimes Unit. Unfortunately, these cases are common, Detective Harris explained in his cluttered office. But the family connection makes this one unusual. Typically, we see estranged spouses or professional identity thieves, not siblings. I provided Detective Harris with everything I had: the fraudulent purchases, the wire transfer attempt, Ryan's history of financial manipulation, and the corporate espionage at Atlas. This is a substantial case, he acknowledged. We'll need to interview your brother. He has a restraining order, I reminded him. He's not supposed to contact me. Yet he's found ways around that, Detective Harris noted. We'll bring him in for questioning. 2 days later, as I was leaving a client meeting, my phone rang with Harris's number. Miss Hamilton, your parents just showed up at the station with your brother. They're demanding to speak with you. I'm not waiving the restraining order, I said firmly. They're claiming you're mentally unstable and framing your brother, Harris continued. That you've been fabricating evidence due to long-standing jealousy issues. That's absurd, I replied, though my voice shook slightly. The evidence is documented by multiple financial institutions. I know, Harris assured me. We're proceeding with the investigation regardless. But you should know your brother is claiming you gave him permission to access your accounts to help manage your finances because you were overwhelmed with work. The audacity was breathtaking. I have emails and texts showing I explicitly told him to stay away from my finances. Forward those to me, Harris requested. The more documentation, the better. When I arrived at my apartment that evening, there was a voicemail from my father. We're trying to help you, Melissa. This vendetta against your brother has gone too far. We've spoken with Dr. Levinson about treatment options. Dr. Levinson had been our family physician growing up. The implication was clear: they were laying groundwork to question my mental competence. The next day, Detective Harris called with disturbing news. We've connected your brother's case to several other victims, he explained. He appears to have been running a small-scale financial fraud operation targeting former classmates, colleagues, even extended family members. How many victims? I asked, stunned. At least 7 that we've identified so far. Most for smaller amounts, $5,000 to $20,000 each. You appear to be the largest target. Why would he risk everything for money? Our parents would give him whatever he asked for. It may not be just about money, Harris suggested. The pattern suggests your brother enjoys the manipulation itself. And there's something else. He has significant gambling debts to some concerning individuals, the kind who don't use collection agencies. The pieces finally clicked into place. Ryan wasn't just trying to steal from me out of spite or greed, he was desperate to pay off dangerous people. That evening I received threatening calls from blocked numbers. The callers never identified themselves but made vague references to your brother's situation and how I should help families settle debts. I reported the calls to Detective Harris, who advised me to stay with friends for a few days. "These aren't people you want knowing your address," he warned. The next morning my parents appeared at the police station again, this time with an expensive attorney who specialized in defending white-collar criminals. "Your parents have mortgaged their home to pay for your brother's defense," Harris informed me. "They're claiming the financial transactions were authorized and that you're manufacturing evidence to damage your brother's reputation." "That's insane," I whispered. "Why would they go to these lengths?" "Family dynamics are complicated," Harris replied sympathetically. "Some parents will do anything to avoid admitting their child is capable of wrongdoing." As Ryan's creditors became more aggressive, my parents grew more desperate in their defense of him. They began calling my friends, colleagues, even clients, spreading Ryan's narrative that I was mentally unstable and vindictively targeting him. The situation had spiraled beyond a family dispute into something far darker. Ryan had dragged everyone into his web of lies, and my parents were enabling his most destructive behaviors at the expense of their own financial security and my safety. It was time to gather every piece of evidence and end this once and for all. With Detective Harris's investigation progressing, I knew I needed professional legal representation to protect myself on multiple fronts. Through a colleague, I was referred to Sarah Blackwell, a former prosecutor who specialized in financial crimes and family law. Sarah's office in Midtown Manhattan projected quiet competence, modern but understated, with awards and credentials displayed discreetly on one wall. The attorney herself matched her surroundings, sharp, professional, and immediately focused on solutions rather than sympathy. "Financial fraud between family members is particularly complicated," Sarah explained after I'd outlined my situation. "Courts often hesitate to treat these cases with the same severity as stranger-to-stranger fraud because of the presumption of shared resources and informal agreements in families." "There was nothing shared or agreed about this," I replied firmly. "I understand," Sarah nodded. "That's why documentation is crucial. We need to establish a clear pattern of unauthorized access and intent to defraud." Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah and I compiled an exhaustive dossier: bank records, credit card statements, IP logs, security camera footage, text messages, emails, and witness statements from Miguel, Ethan, Jack, and other colleagues who had witnessed Ryan's escalating behavior. We also included documentation of the corporate espionage attempts against Atlas, with statements from affected clients and IT security reports confirming the unauthorized access originated from Chicago. "This is comprehensive," Sarah observed, reviewing the final package. "The financial crimes are clear-cut. The corporate espionage may be harder to prove definitively, but it establishes a pattern of behavior that supports our case." With the evidence assembled, Sarah filed formal charges against Ryan for identity theft, wire fraud, and violation of the restraining order. Detective Harris's investigation had uncovered enough evidence for the DA's office to pursue criminal charges independently, but our civil case would run parallel, seeking financial restitution. The day after the charges were filed, my parents called. "How could you do this to your own brother?" my mother sobbed. "Criminal charges. Do you know what that could do to his future?" "He committed crimes, Mom. Multiple crimes against multiple people, including me. What about my future?" "We've hired Stanley Goldberg to represent Ryan," my father interjected, naming one of Chicago's most expensive criminal defense attorneys. "He says these charges are excessive and vindictive. "Where are you getting the money for Stanley Goldberg?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "We've taken out a second mortgage," my father admitted reluctantly. "Ryan's our son. We won't abandon him." The knowledge that my parents were sacrificing their retirement security for Ryan's legal defense was painful but not surprising. The pattern was deeply entrenched. Ryan created problems, my parents mortgaged their future to solve them, and everyone expected me to eventually pick up the pieces. "Not this time. I'm sorry you've put yourselves in that position," I said carefully. "But I won't be dropping the charges. Ryan needs to face consequences for once in his life." 2 days later, I received notice that Ryan was countersuing me for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and interference with business relationship. The claims were absurd, but they would require time and money to refute. "This is a common tactic," Sarah assured me. "It's meant to drain your resources and pressure you into settling. We won't let it work." The first court appearance was scheduled for a preliminary hearing on the criminal charges. I flew to Chicago, where Sarah had arranged for local counsel to accompany me. The Cook County Courthouse was imposing and impersonal, its marble corridors echoing with hurried footsteps and hushed legal conversations. I spotted my parents immediately huddled with Ryan and his attorney outside the courtroom. My mother's face was drawn with worry, my father's set in grim determination. Ryan, by contrast, appeared remarkably composed in a conservative suit that must have been newly purchased for the occasion. When they saw me, my mother made a move as if to approach, but Ryan's attorney placed a restraining hand on her arm, shaking his head slightly. They filed into the courtroom without acknowledging me. Inside, the proceedings were brief but consequential. Ryan pleaded not guilty to all charges. His attorney argued passionately for low bail, citing Ryan's strong family ties and misunderstanding between siblings. The prosecutor countered with evidence of Ryan's sophistication in evading detection and the multiple victims involved. She also noted the restraining order violation and mentioned the threatening calls from Ryan's creditors as evidence he posed an ongoing risk. Judge Martinez set bail at $250,000, higher than Ryan's attorney had requested, but lower than the prosecution had sought. As the bailiff led Ryan away, he locked eyes with me briefly. There was no remorse there, only cold calculation and simmering rage. Outside the courtroom, my parents approached me despite their attorney's obvious disapproval. "Are you satisfied now?" my father demanded. "Seeing your brother in handcuffs." "This isn't about satisfaction," I replied. "It's about consequences for actions that have hurt real people." "We're selling the house to cover bail and legal fees," my mother said, tears streaming down her face. "Everything we've worked for our entire lives." "Is that what you wanted?" "I never wanted any of this," I answered truthfully. "Ryan created this situation, not me." "You've always been jealous of your brother," my father accused. "Always resented the attention he received." It was such a fundamental misreading of our family dynamic that I almost laughed. I resented the double standard, not the attention. I resented having my college funds stolen, my achievements dismissed, and now my financial security and professional reputation attacked. "We did the best we could as parents," my mother insisted. "For Ryan, maybe. Never for me." As I walked away, I heard Ryan's attorney speaking urgently to my parents. "We need to discuss a strategy for after he makes bail. There are concerns about the other creditors that need to be addressed immediately." I turned back. "What other creditors?" The attorney glanced at me with obvious distaste. "That's privileged information." My father looked uncomfortable. "It's nothing, just some business associates." But I could see the fear in my mother's eyes. Ryan owed money to dangerous people, and my parents were now entangled in his mess far more deeply than I had realized. Outside the courthouse, I was surprised to find Aunt Barbara, my mother's sister, waiting by a coffee cart. "Melissa," she called, waving me over. "Do you have a minute?" Barbara had always been kind but distant, living in Seattle and visiting only occasionally. I hadn't expected her to be involved in this situation. "I flew in when I heard what was happening," she explained. handing me a coffee. "There's something you need to know. Something that might explain everything." We found a quiet bench in a nearby park, and Barbara began to fill in the gaps in my understanding of our family history, gaps that would prove crucial to finally ending this nightmare. Aunt Barbara clutched her coffee cup, with both hands, steam rising between us in the cool Chicago morning. Unlike my mother's perfectly coiffed appearance, Barbara wore her gray hair in a practical bob, her face free of makeup and creased with concern. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here," she began. "We haven't been close since I confronted her about Ryan years ago." "Confronted her about what I asked?" Barbara sighed. "This isn't the first time Ryan has done something like this. There's been a pattern since he was a teenager, but your parents have always cleaned up his messes, hidden the evidence, made excuses." She opened her purse and removed a manila envelope. "When your grandmother Ruth died 5 years ago, she left specific bequests in her will. You were supposed to receive her sapphire necklace and $25,000 for your educational advancement. Did you ever get either?" I shook my head, stunned. "I was told Grandma Ruth left everything to my parents to distribute as they saw fit." "That's what Ryan told everyone," Barbara said grimly. "He was helping your parents with the estate paperwork since they were grieving. But that's not what happened." Inside the envelope were copies of my grandmother's actual will, bank statements, and a series of increasingly concerned emails from my grandmother's attorney to my parents, questioning the distribution of assets. "Ryan essentially hijacked the estate," Barbara explained. "He convinced your parents to give him power of attorney during the difficult time. Then he systematically diverted funds meant for various family members, mostly to himself, but he made sure your inheritance in particular disappeared completely." "Why would he target my inheritance specifically?" I asked, though I was beginning to understand. "Because you were the only one who ever stood up to him," Barbara replied simply. "Everyone else in the family either enabled his behavior or looked the other way. You represented a threat to his system." The documents showed that nearly $120,000 of my grandmother's estate had gone unaccounted for, with Ryan claiming various administrative fees and outstanding debts that Grandma Ruth had allegedly wanted settled quietly. "Why are you showing me this now?" I asked. "Because history is repeating itself," Barbara replied. "When your grandmother died, Ryan had gambling debts then too, smaller but significant. Your parents covered for him, believing it was a one-time mistake. Now they've mortgaged their future repeatedly for his mistakes, and I'm worried about what will happen to them." Barbara had one more revelation. She had received a call from Ryan last month asking for a bridge loan of $50,000 for a guaranteed investment opportunity. When she declined, he had turned on her, threatening to reveal family secrets that would devastate her children if she didn't help in the family's time of need. "He's been working his way through the entire extended family," Barbara concluded. "Anyone with resources or connections he could exploit." Armed with this new information, I returned to my hotel room and called Sarah. "This changes things," Sarah agreed after I explained. "If we can prove a pattern of estate fraud going back years, it strengthens our current case considerably. The grandmother's will is particularly significant. That's documented financial fraud against multiple family members." We spent the evening developing a new strategy, incorporating Barbara's documents and identifying other relatives who might have similar stories. The next morning, I made a decision I'd been avoiding. I needed to confront my parents directly with all the evidence in hand. No more talking through attorneys or trading accusations in courthouse corridors. I called and requested a meeting at their home. To my surprise, they agreed immediately. The house I'd grown up in looked smaller, somehow its once pristine lawn now showing signs of neglect. Inside, evidence of financial strain was everywhere, spaces on the walls where artwork had been sold, my mother's prized silver collection missing from the dining room hutch. They sat across from me at the kitchen table looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen them. I placed Barbara's envelope and my own file of evidence between us. Before we start, I said calmly, I want you to know that I understand you love Ryan. I know you've always wanted what's best for him. But I need to understand why you've even enabled him to hurt so many people, including yourselves. My father started to protest, but my mother placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. Just listen, Thomas, she said quietly. Just once, let's listen to her. I methodically laid out everything, the evidence of Ryan's fraud against me, against Atlas, against his former employers. The documentation from Barbara, showing his theft from Grandma Ruth's estate, the statements from his other victims, the threatening calls from his creditors. This isn't one mistake or a misunderstanding, I concluded. This is who Ryan is, who he's always been. And by protecting him from consequences, you've allowed him to become worse, to hurt more people, to put himself and now you in genuine danger. My parents sat in silence, my father staring at the documents, my mother gazing out the window at the Japanese maple she'd planted when we first moved in. We know, my mother said, finally, her voice barely audible. What I wasn't sure I'd heard correctly. We know who Ryan is, she repeated, turning to face me, tears streaming down her face. We've always known. Then why, I asked, my voice breaking. Why sacrifice everything for him? Why let him hurt me, hurt others, hurt yourselves? My father looked up, his expression a complex mixture of shame and defiance. Because he promised to take care of us. When we're old. When we need help. The admission hit me like a physical blow. And you thought I wouldn't? You're so independent, Melissa, my mother said, as if that explained everything. You built your life in New York, your career. You never needed us. So this was punishment. For being self-sufficient. No, my father interjected. Security. Ryan promised he'd always be here, living nearby, looking after us. You had your own life. The life you raised me to have, I exclaimed. You taught me to work hard, be responsible, stand on my own feet. Then punished me for doing exactly that while rewarding Ryan for doing the opposite. The cruel irony was overwhelming. My self-sufficiency, born of necessity after they'd used my college fund for Ryan, had been used against me. My success had become justification for their favoritism. He's our son, my mother said simply, as if that explained and excused everything. And I'm your daughter, I replied. But that never seemed to count for as much. My father stood abruptly and left the room. When he returned, he carried a folder of his own. These are the properties we've lost covering Ryan's ventures, he said, placing it on the table. The retirement accounts we've emptied. The loans we can't repay. The documentation was devastating. My parents had systematically liquidated virtually everything they owned over the past decade. The house was mortgaged far beyond its value. Their retirement accounts were empty. They had taken personal loans at exorbitant interest rates. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Because we've finally run out, my father said simply. There's nothing left to sell, no one left to borrow from. When the bail money's gone, that's it. And Ryan's other creditors, I pressed. The ones who've been making threatening calls. My mother's hand trembled as she reached for her tea. They came to the house last week. Said they knew we'd sold things to help Ryan. Said they expected compensation. The full picture suddenly became clear. My parents hadn't just enabled Ryan's behavior, they had become entangled in it to the point where they now faced financial ruin and potentially physical danger. Their blind devotion to their son had led them to this precipice. I can't fix this for you, I said finally. I won't. We're not asking you to, my father replied, surprising me. We just wanted you to understand why we did what we did, even if it was wrong. It was wrong, I confirmed. And it hurt people. It hurt me. We know, my mother whispered. Too late, but we know. I gathered my documents, slowly processing what had just happened. This wasn't the vindication I'd expected, nor the denial I'd feared. It was something more complex, an admission without true remorse, an acknowledgement without real change. What will you do now? I asked as I stood to leave. Face it, my father said simply. Whatever comes. We don't have any other choice anymore. As I walked down the familiar front path for what I suspected might be the last time I felt an unexpected sense of liberation, the mystery at the heart of my family, why my parents had always favored Ryan despite his behavior, was finally solved. It hadn't been about love, at least not entirely. It had been about their own fears of abandonment in old age, their insecurity masked as parental devotion. The revelation didn't heal the wounds of a lifetime of unfairness, but it provided something I hadn't expected: clarity. And with clarity came the strength to finally walk away from a toxic family system that had damaged everyone within it, even the supposed favorite. In my car, I called Sarah. I'm ready to proceed with everything I told her. Criminal charges, civil suit, all of it. But there's something else I need to do first. What's that? She asked. Find a way to protect my parents from Ryan's creditors, I replied. They've made terrible choices, but they don't deserve to be threatened in their own home. That's very generous of you, Sarah observed carefully. It's not about generosity, I explained. It's about breaking the cycle. They enabled Ryan because they feared abandonment. I won't abandon them even though they basically abandon me. I'll help them with safety but not with bailouts. That's the difference they never understood. As I drove away from the neighborhood where I'd grown up, I felt the weight of family obligation transforming into something healthier: compassion with boundaries, support without enabling. It wasn't the clean break I'd sometimes fantasized about, but it was something more valuable: a path forward that honored my own worth while acknowledging the complicated reality of family. Ryan would face consequences. My parents would face reality. And I would finally be free to define family on my own terms. 6 months after that fateful confrontation with my parents, I stood in my Brooklyn apartment watching snow drift lazily past my windows. Winter had come, bringing with it a strange new peace I was still learning to trust. The legal proceedings against Ryan had concluded largely as Sarah had predicted. Faced with overwhelming evidence and multiple victims coming forward, he had accepted a plea deal, guilty to 3 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of identity theft. The 4-year sentence he received was less than the prosecution had sought, but more than my parents had hoped for. The civil case had been settled out of court, with Ryan required to make restitution to his victims, a largely symbolic judgment since he had no assets and wouldn't for the foreseeable future. The money was gone, spent on gambling, luxury items, and whatever else had momentarily filled the void within him. My parents had faced financial ruin, just as they'd feared. The house where I'd grown up had been sold at a significant loss, barely covering the multiple mortgages against it. They had moved into a small 1-bedroom apartment in a retirement community, their golden years now defined by modest fixed incomes and careful budgeting. I had refused to bail them out financially, a decision that had initially heightened their sense of betrayal, but ultimately forced them to face reality, perhaps for the first time. What I had done was hire a security consultant to ensure their physical safety from Ryan's more dangerous creditors, and connect them with financial counseling services to manage what little remained of their assets. Our relationship remained strained, but was evolving into something more honest. Monthly phone calls had replaced the pretense of happy family gatherings. Sometimes these conversations were painful, reopening old wounds as my parents gradually confronted their role in enabling Ryan. Other times, there were glimpses of the parents I'd always wished for, interested in my life, proud of my accomplishments, without qualification or comparison. Professional boundaries had been another battle to win. After Ryan's conviction, several Atlas clients expressed concerns about working with someone associated with such a high-profile fraud case. Jack had stood firmly behind me, issuing a company-wide statement detailing how my actions had protected client interests and demonstrated integrity under pressure. The Hamilton Principles had even become part of Atlas's internal training on data security and ethical client management, a strange form of validation I never would have anticipated. The promotion I'd been working toward for years had come through last month: Executive Vice President of Client Strategy, with an office overlooking Central Park, and a team of 25 reporting to me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Ryan's attempts to destroy my career had inadvertently highlighted my value to the company. Personal relationships had been more challenging to navigate. The intense public and private scrutiny had made me withdraw, initially unsure who I could trust. Jessica had remained steadfast, as had Jack and a handful of close colleagues. Ethan from 5B had become an unexpected source of support, our neighborly relationship evolving into friendship and recently something more, though we were taking things slowly. The most surprising connections had come from extended family members. Aunt Barbara had become a regular presence in my life, our weekly video calls, a source of the maternal guidance I'd always craved. Cousins I'd barely known growing up had reached out after learning the truth about Ryan's manipulation of Grandma Ruth's estate, sharing their own experiences and forming a loose support network. Other relatives had maintained their allegiance to Ryan despite the evidence, unable to reconcile the charming, promising young man they thought they knew with the manipulative fraudster revealed in court. Their continued defense of him was painful but no longer surprising. Some patterns were too deeply ingrained to break even when confronted with overwhelming evidence. I had channeled my experience into something constructive, starting a support group for victims of financial abuse by family members. What had begun as informal meetings with 5 people in a coffee shop had grown into a network of over 30, with a website and regular workshops on financial security and boundary setting. The work was healing, transforming my private pain into public purpose. Each person who reclaimed their financial independence after family exploitation felt like a personal victory, proof that the cycle could be broken. Ryan himself remained a complicated absence in my life. He had written several letters from prison, alternating between blame, manipulation, and occasional glimpses of what might have been genuine remorse. I had read them all but responded to none, unwilling to reopen that channel without evidence of meaningful change. My parents visited him regularly, their instinct to protect their son apparently undiminished, despite everything. I didn't begrudge them. These visits, their relationship with Ryan was theirs to navigate, just as my decision to maintain distance was mine. The phone rang, interrupting my reflections. My parents' number. Melissa, my mother's voice sounded strained. I know we usually talk on Sundays, but something's come up. My stomach tightened with familiar apprehension. What is it? Ryan's parole hearing has been scheduled earlier than expected. He's asked if you would write a letter of support. The old pattern beckoned, the expectation that I would sacrifice my boundaries to support Ryan, that family obligation trumped personal well-being. I can't do that, Mom, I replied calmly. You know I can't. He's your brother, she began automatically, then stopped herself. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked. We agreed I wouldn't put you in this position. The acknowledgement, small as it was, represented progress. Thank you for respecting that, I said. How are you and Dad doing with the budget counselor? The conversation shifted to practical matters, their adjusted retirement plans, the community garden. My father had somewhat reluctantly joined my mother's part-time job at the community center gift shop. Small steps toward a new normal. After we hung up, I returned to the window, watching the snow transform the city into something softer, quieter. The pain hadn't disappeared, perhaps it never would entirely, but it had evolved into something I could carry without being defined by it. Family was complicated. Blood ties didn't automatically merit blind loyalty, and sometimes the healthiest form of love involved distance and boundaries. These weren't easy lessons, but they were ones I had earned through difficult experience. The journey from victim to advocate, from dutiful daughter to independent woman who defined family on her own terms, hadn't been linear. There had been setbacks, moments of doubt, days when the unfairness of it all had threatened to overwhelm me. But standing in my apartment watching snow blanket the city I'd made my home, I recognized something I hadn't expected to find in the aftermath of such betrayal: peace. Not perfect, not complete, but real. My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Dinner still on despite the snow. Made reservations at that new place you mentioned. I smiled and typed back, absolutely. Some things are worth braving the weather for. Some things were worth braving many kinds of storms for: self-respect, authentic connections, the freedom to define success and family on my own terms. These were the true treasures I'd fought for, and would continue to protect, not with anger or vengeance, but with the quiet strength that comes from knowing your own worth. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who consistently crossed lines? What strategies helped you maintain those boundaries while taking care of your own well-being? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to the channel for more real-life experiences that might help others going through similar situations. Remember, sometimes the strongest thing you can say is no, and sometimes the healthiest love requires distance. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength on your own journey to self-worth and healing.